There's been a lot of discussion with vitamin D and how it helps boost the immune system for the body, especially during this time. It also helps the body absorb more calcium, phosphate, and magnesium, as well as reduce inflammation. Vitamin D is something that we need in our body. But today I'm going to be talking about, first of all, how vitamin D is with mature or aging skin. Clinical studies have shown that the more that we age, the more sunlight we need in our skin in order to pre-produce the vitamin D3. In fact, clinical studies have shown that more than 80% of the pre-vitamin D3 that we need is actually produced in our skin. Clinical studies showed that when they compared the skin of 8 to 18-year-olds as compared to 72 to 82-year-olds, the clinical studies showed that the more mature skin needed more than 2 folds more of sunlight just to produce the same amount of vitamin D3. The study also concluded that even though mature skin actually needs a lot more sunlight to produce the vitamin D3, what they've also found is they actually get less exposure because they're not spending as much time outdoors getting that sunlight. Clinical studies showed that when they measured the level of vitamin D3 in African Americans, Mexican Americans, compared to the non-Hispanic Caucasians, they actually, both of those groups fared a lot lower in the vitamin D3, and they concluded it could be because of the increase of the skin pigmentation. This inhibits the dermal synthesis of cholecalciferol, which is the vitamin D3. And it also said that it could pose as an increased risk of chronic lifestyle diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and hypertension. However, despite the lower levels of vitamin D3 in African Americans, they tended to suffer less bone mineral density, and so they suffered less bone fractures compared to their Caucasian counterparts. When they compared the Mexican Americans to the Caucasian counterparts, there was no significant difference in the bone mineral density as well as bone fractures. How come they never do Asians? They never do Asians in any of these types of tests. So irritating. And we're actually the ones that get osteoporosis the most. Go figure. Anyway, if you're finding this information helpful and you haven't subscribed to our channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. And most of all, make sure you give us a thumbs up if this is the type of information you find helpful. So finally, for those of you who are using Retin A or Retinol or any other type of topical medications or even the prescription level Accutane that makes your skin more prone to photosensitivity, you may have to find other options of supplementing vitamin D, because the vitamin D3 or the cholecalciferol, which is the one that is the exposure to UV rays that gets on your skin and it converts it into the vitamin D3, is done by exposing your skin to unprotected, so basically not using a sunscreen, since sunscreen protects our skin from UVB, which is the burning rays that it needs in order to convert that to vitamin D3. So if you're using anything that sensitizes your skin, that makes your skin not tolerate long terms of exposure to unprotected UV rays, those are the things that you may need to consider. The issue with that is usually if you supplement your diet with vitamin D2, which is plant sourced, it's usually a lot lower and it's not as effective, because again, 80% of the vitamin D that we need has to come from the sun. The major source of vitamin D for humans is from the UVB-induced dermal synthesis of cholecalciferol. Generally speaking, without taking into consideration where you live, so if you are further or closer to the equator or higher or lower altitude, the medications that you may be using, how old you are, and your lifestyle of how much time you spend outdoors, the general rule of thumb of unprotected sun exposure is about between 5 to 30 minutes. I have seen different literature where it says you need, if you're up in the north, all the way up to 1.5 hours of sun exposure. So of course, if you're using anything that makes your skin less tolerable and more prone to burning, you may have to incorporate even more vitamin D supplements to help boost your immune system, to help your skin increase its absorption of calcium, magnesium, and phosphate, and reduce inflammation. And those of you who have darker skin or more mature skin, you're going to even need even more significant amounts of vitamin D. So here are some food sources to help supplement where you cannot get the vitamin D from the sun. So the first one is wild salmon. Wild salmon has more vitamin D than farmed Atlantic salmon. Other things you can do is the fishy fish or the oily fish, and this could be anything from herring, mackerel, canned tuna, cod liver oil, sardines, and halibut. The next one is egg yolks. Now, the interesting thing I found out about egg yolks is if the egg yolks come from pasture-raised chickens who are out in the sun, their vitamin D levels of those eggs are a lot higher than the ones that are commercially raised that are indoors and do not get any sun exposure. And for those of you who are vegan or vegetarian and you need to get your vitamin D from plant source, one of the highest plant sources of vitamin D, or actually it's ergocalciferol, which is vitamin D2, not as effective as vitamin D3 according to some clinical studies, and I'll put those in the links in the description below, but are wild grown mushrooms, the ones that are outdoors getting the sun versus the ones that again are commercially grown indoors that don't get any sun. So those are your best sources for that. Now, if you don't know if the mushrooms that you get at the grocery store are getting the vitamin D, then here is one tip that you can do to actually increase the vitamin D in your mushrooms after you have purchased it. And if you want to watch that, check out this next video here, because remember, makeup is an art, skincare is a science.